Broke waitress returns billionaire's lost wallet full of cash. But what he did to her was unreal. I'm about to tell you a story that's going to make half of you furious at the woman and half of you furious at the man. Comment your prediction right now. Who do you think is the villain in this story? The broke waitress or the billionaire? Trust me, by the end, your answer might completely change. What do you mean it's gone? Damon Wolf's voice exploded through the 42nd floor like a nuclear bomb. His assistant Rebecca cowered behind her desk while two other employees practically pressed themselves against the wall, hoping to blend into the expensive wallpaper. Sir, we've searched everywhere. Your car, the restaurant, your apartment. Rebecca's voice trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. Damon's hand shot to his back pocket for the 100th time that morning. Still empty. The custom security token in his wallet was the only key to an encrypted vault containing the prototype that would make or break his billion-dollar project. No backup. No cloud storage. No second chances. One missing piece of leather had just brought the most powerful man in the city to his knees. Call security. Check every camera in a 10-block radius. Damon slammed his fist on his mahogany desk, sending his coffee mug flying. The hot liquid splattered across important contracts, but he didn't care. Get my driver on the phone. Tear apart my penthouse again. Rebecca scrambled to follow orders while Damon paced like a caged tiger. His perfectly styled hair was now a mess from running his hands through it, and his usually immaculate suit looked like he'd been wrestling with it. The board meeting scheduled for noon would have to wait. The merger discussions would stall. Everything hinged on that stupid wallet, and it had vanished into thin air like some kind of magic trick. 20 miles away, Lena Carter's feet felt like they were on fire inside her cheap sneakers. She'd just survived another delightful double shift at Murphy's Diner, where she'd been called sweetie by men old enough to be her grandfather and stiffed on tips by customers who treated her like furniture while wearing more than expensive watches. Just another glamorous day in paradise, she muttered, grabbing a wet rag to clean the booths. Her uniform reeked of grease and broken dreams, and her hair had escaped its ponytail hours ago. She was humming an off-key version of some pop song when her hand bumped against something under booth 7. A wallet. Thick, expensive leather. Lena flipped open the wallet and her jaw dropped. The driver's license photo stared back at her with those cold, judgmental eyes she knew all too well. Damon Wolf, the same pompous jerk who came in twice a week, ordered black coffee like he was doing her a favor, and had never left so much as a quarter tip. Son of a... She caught herself before finishing the curse. The wallet was stuffed with more cash than she'd seen in her entire life, credit cards that had higher limits than most people's mortgages, and business cards for people who appeared on magazine covers. Her fingers itched to count the bills, especially when she thought about the eviction notice crumpled in her purse and her brother's prescription bottles sitting empty on their kitchen counter. Wedged between the bills was a yellow sticky note that made Lena snort with laughter. If you're reading this and you're not me, put this back. You can't afford the kind of karma I carry. She read it twice, shaking her head in disbelief. Rich people are absolutely insane, she said to the empty diner. Part of her wanted to take just enough to cover Jake's medication and pretend she'd never seen the rest. It would serve Mr. No-Tip right. But another part of her, the part that sounded suspiciously like her mother's voice, reminded her that stealing made her just as bad as every person who'd ever looked down on her. She tucked the wallet into her jacket pocket and Googled Wolf Industries on her cracked phone screen. She checked the time, 11:30 p.m. Too late to return it tonight, but first thing tomorrow, she'd march into his glass tower and hand it back. Damon hadn't slept. He sat in his home office, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled papers, making calls to every security company in the city. His staff had torn apart his life and found nothing. Millions of dollars in deals hung in the balance. At 6 a.m., his head of security called with an update. Nothing. The wallet had vanished like smoke. Damon threw his phone across the room and watched it shatter against the wall. Somewhere out there, someone had access to his entire world, and he was completely helpless to stop them. The feeling ate at him like acid. The next morning, Lena stood outside the Wolf Industries building, craning her neck to see the top. It looked like a giant glass middle finger pointed at the sky, all sharp edges and intimidating reflections. She was wearing her best jeans and cleanest t-shirt, which still made her feel like she was showing up to a black tie event in pajamas. The security guard looked her up and down like she was planning to steal the furniture. "I need to see Damon Wolf," she announced, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The guard actually laughed out loud. "Sure thing, princess. You and half the city. You need an appointment, a referral, and probably a miracle." Lena pulled out the wallet and watched his smug expression melt like ice cream in summer. "I've got something better." The elevator to the top floor moved so smoothly Lena couldn't tell they were moving at all. The security guard, Tony, according to his name tag, kept glancing at her like she might disappear. "You really found Mr. Wolf's wallet?" he asked for the fourth time. "Under booth 7 at Murphy's Diner. Your boss has terrible handwriting, by the way. That karma note looks like a chicken wrote it." The elevator dinged softly as they passed the 30th floor. "Fair warning," Tony said quietly. "He's been having what you might call a difficult morning. Half the staff called in sick just to avoid him." Lena grinned. "Sounds like my kind of challenge." The 42nd floor looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Everything was white and chrome and expensive. Even the air smelled rich. Rebecca looked up from her desk as Lena approached, her eyes widening at the sight of someone in jeans and sneakers in their majestic office. "Can I help you?" Rebecca's voice had that special kind of politeness that wasn't polite at all. Lena held up the wallet like a peace offering. "I'm here to return this to its owner. And before you ask, yes, everything's still inside, including that weird little note about karma." Rebecca's eyes went so wide they nearly fell out of her head. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Mr. Wolf! Sir!" She practically sprinted toward the corner office in her designer heels, shouting like the building was on fire. Through the glass walls, Lena could see a tall figure hunched over a massive desk covered in papers. Damon looked up as Rebecca burst through his office door, and Lena got her first real look at him up close. The photos in magazines didn't capture the shadows under his eyes or the way his jaw was clenched so tight it could crack nuts. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck and was trying to pretend it hadn't hurt. "Sir, this young woman has your wallet." Rebecca's voice was breathless with excitement. Damon's head snapped up, and for the first time, those cold eyes focused directly on Lena. She felt like a bug under a microscope, but refused to look away. After a long moment, he stood up and walked toward them. "You have my wallet." It wasn't a question. Damon's voice was rough, like he'd been gargling gravel, and his eyes never left her face. Up close, he looked even more exhausted than she'd thought, with shadows under his eyes and stubble that suggested he'd forgotten to shave. "Found it at the diner." Lena pulled the wallet from her jacket and held it out. "You really should work on your penmanship, by the way." That note was barely legible. For a split second, something that might have been surprise flickered across his features. Then his hand brushed hers as he took the wallet, and she noticed his fingers were actually shaking slightly. Damon opened the wallet slowly, like he was defusing a bomb. Lena watched him check every compartment, count the cash, and finally find the small security token tucked behind his license. His shoulders sagged with relief so profound it was almost painful to watch. "Why?" The question came out sharp and suspicious. "Why didn't you take anything?" Lena shrugged, shoving her hands into her pockets. Because I'm not a thief. Also, because rich people karma sounds absolutely terrifying. I've got enough problems without adding cosmic revenge to the list. The corner of his mouth twitched, and she could have sworn she saw the ghost of a smile trying to escape. "What's your name?" Damon asked, still studying her like she was some kind of puzzle he couldn't solve. Rebecca hovered nearby, probably recording every word for posterity. "Lena Carter. I work at Murphy's Diner, slinging coffee to ungrateful customers who think tipping is optional." She watched his face carefully. "You come in twice a week. Black coffee, no sugar, no conversation, and definitely no tip. Ring any bells?" Now he looked uncomfortable, which was exactly what she'd been going for. "I don't." "Remember the help?" "Yeah, I figured. Don't worry. I wasn't expecting a Christmas card." He slipped the wallet into his jacket pocket and stared at her like she was a delivery person who'd overstayed her welcome. Not a single word of thanks. Not even basic acknowledgement. "You're welcome," Lena said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Still nothing from him. Wow. Most normal people say thank you when someone goes out of their way to return their lost property. Damon's eyes snapped to hers, cold and annoyed. "I didn't ask for your commentary," he said, his voice like ice. The disgust in his tone was unmistakable, like she'd personally offended him by daring to expect basic manners. "And I certainly didn't ask for attitude from someone who works in a diner." He said the last word like it was something dirty. Lena's temper exploded. "Right? My mistake for expecting basic human decency from someone who can't even be bothered to tip." Damon's face twisted with revulsion at her audacity. "Rebecca, escort this woman out." Lena turned and marched toward the elevator, muttering under her breath. "Unbelievable piece of work. Waste my morning and $5 on bus fare to return his stupid wallet. And he treats me like garbage." The elevator doors closed on his shocked expression. That night, Damon sat in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights, but all he could think about was the waitress, Lena Carter. No one had ever spoken to him the way she had, with such complete disregard for who he was. Such utter fearlessness. Everyone in his world either worshipped the ground he walked on or trembled when he entered a room. Board members, employees, business partners, they all treated him like some kind of god. But this girl had looked him dead in the eye and called him out like he was nobody special. What disturbed him most was the money question. Poor people always wanted something from him. Always had angles, schemes, their hands out looking for opportunities. But she'd returned every penny in that wallet and then had the nerve to lecture him about manners. It went against everything he understood about human nature. At 11:30 p.m., he grabbed his phone and called Rebecca. "I need a complete background check on Lena Carter, the girl from today. I want everything." "Sir, it's nearly midnight." Rebecca's voice was groggy. "I want everything on her by morning. Education, family, employment history, financial situation. Everything." He hung up before she could protest. The report landed on his desk at 6 a.m., and Damon read every word twice. Lena Carter, 24. Former computer science major at State University with a 3.8 GPA. Full academic scholarship recipient. Dean's List every semester. Her professors had used words like exceptional intelligence and natural leader. She'd been 3 months away from graduating summa cum laude when she dropped out. Reason: younger brother diagnosed with chronic illness requiring expensive treatment and full-time care. She turned down 3 corporate job offers because they required relocation. 2 years at the diner, perfect attendance record, 0 customer complaints. This girl wasn't just honest. She was brilliant. Wasted potential working for tips when she should be running companies. He was curious. He wanted to know how anyone could think like that. Why would you help someone that wouldn't give anything back? Business didn't work like that in Miami. He wanted to meet this woman again. By 7 a.m., Damon knew exactly what he was going to do. Rebecca, get Lena Carter on the phone. Damon ordered the moment his assistant arrived. Tell her I have a business proposition. Rebecca looked confused but reached for her phone. What kind of proposition, sir? Employment opportunity. He didn't say anything else. 20 minutes later, Rebecca called him. Ms. Carter on line 1. She sounds suspicious. Damon picked up. Ms. Carter. Let me guess, came her sarcastic voice. You want to hire me? The girl who never finished college and currently smells like French fry grease? Look around, Mr. Wolf. I'm pretty sure I violated about 17 dress codes just by standing in your office. $100,000 annually, plus a full benefits package. Are you interested? The silence on the other end was so long he wondered if she'd fainted. $100,000, Lena repeated slowly. To work for someone who couldn't even say thank you when I returned his wallet. Her voice was flat with disbelief. The position involves managing my schedule, handling correspondence, coordinating appointments. Standard administrative work. Damon kept his tone neutral, deliberately avoiding any mention of 18-hour days, impossible deadlines, or the fact that his last assistant had been found crying in a supply closet. The plan was to teach her a lesson on how the world worked. Nice doesn't pay bills. Health insurance covers family members after 90 days. He heard her sharp intake of breath. From his assessment, she would quit way before then, breaking under pressure. What exactly would I be responsible for? Nothing overly complicated. The lie came easily. I ran a background check. Your academic record shows you're intelligent and capable. The salary is non-negotiable. Are you interested, or should I move on to other candidates? He could practically hear her brain working through the phone. I need to think about it. Lena hung up and stared at her phone like it might explode. $100,000. More money than she'd ever dreamed of having. But working for someone who'd been so incredibly rude to her? Someone who ran background checks on people without permission. Jake looked up from his laptop when she walked into their living room. Who was that? Remember the wallet guy? He just offered me a job. She explained the conversation, watching Jake's expression cycle through disbelief and concern. Lena, that's incredible money, but... He closed his laptop carefully. The guy sounds like a complete nightmare. Are you sure you want to work for someone who treats people like that? For $100,000? I'd work for the devil himself. She sat down beside him. This could change everything, Jake. Your medical bills, better doctors, maybe even a real apartment. And what if he makes your life miserable? Then I'll quit and find something else. But at least we'll have some savings first. 2 days later, Lena called the number Damon had given her. Rebecca answered on the first ring. Wolf Industries. How may I help you? This is Lena Carter. I'd like to accept Mr. Wolf's job offer. She could hear the relief in Rebecca's voice. Oh, thank goodness. He's been absolutely impossible since you didn't call back immediately. Can you start Monday morning? Yes, but I have some conditions. Lena had spent 2 days thinking about this. I want the salary and benefits in writing, and I want to know exactly what my job responsibilities are. Of course, Mr. Wolf will go over everything with you Monday morning. He's not exactly patient with questions, though. Lena grinned despite herself. Good thing I'm not easily intimidated. Monday morning, Lena stood outside Wolf Industries wearing the only professional outfit she owned. A black skirt and white blouse she'd bought for job interviews that never led anywhere. She'd braided her hair and even put on makeup, trying to look like she belonged. Rebecca met her in the lobby with genuine warmth and a stack of paperwork that looked intimidating enough to kill a small forest. "Welcome to the asylum, Lena. Mr. Wolf is in back-to-back meetings until noon, so we'll start with orientation and get you set up with an office." An office? Lena had never had an office before. As they rode the elevator up, Rebecca leaned over conspiratorially. "He's already had 4 cups of coffee and 0 food. He gets extra cranky when he's running on caffeine and determination." Lena's office was actually a small room connected to Damon's main office, with a desk, computer, and a view of the city that made her forget to breathe for a moment. Rebecca walked her through the filing system, the appointment calendar, and the various ways to reach Damon when he was traveling or locked in meetings. "Your main job is keeping him alive and functional," Rebecca explained, pulling up his schedule on the computer. "He forgets to eat, doesn't sleep enough, and has a tendency to work until he literally collapses. The previous assistant found him passed out at his desk twice in 1 week." Lena studied the screen, seeing meetings scheduled from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. with no breaks for basic human needs. "This is completely insane. When does he have time to be, human?" Rebecca looked at her like she'd asked when unicorns were real. "He doesn't. That's where you come in." At exactly noon, Damon emerged from his office looking like he'd been wrestling with hostile takeovers all morning. His tie was crooked, his hair was messed up from running his hands through it, and he had that same exhausted look she remembered from the last time she was there, but amplified. "Carter." He nodded at her like he was confirming she was real and not some caffeine-induced hallucination. "Rebecca says you're starting today." His voice was neutral, businesslike, but she caught him glancing at her setup with what might have been approval. "Your first assignment is lunch. I have a meeting at 1:30, and I need to eat something before I pass out and embarrass myself." He handed her a credit card with the casual air of someone who'd never checked a bank balance in his life. "Surprise me. But nothing fancy. I hate fancy food." "Any allergies or foods that might kill you?" "I hate everything. Surprise me anyway." Lena stood on the busy street outside Wolf Industries, holding a credit card that seemed differently heavy. She could have gone to some expensive restaurant with tiny portions and unpronounceable names, but something told her that wasn't what he wanted. 20 minutes later, she returned with a bag from a small Vietnamese place 3 blocks away. Pho with extra herbs, fresh spring rolls, and Vietnamese coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Real food, not the corporate catering garbage she'd seen wheeled into office buildings. When she knocked on his door, he looked up from a mountain of contracts with the expression of a man who'd forgotten food was something humans needed to survive. Damon stared at the steaming bowl of pho like it was some kind of alien artifact. "What is this?" he asked, but he was already reaching for the chopsticks with curious fingers. Lena sat down across from his desk, unwrapping her own lunch without ceremony. Vietnamese comfort food. The lady at the restaurant took one look at me and said this would fix whatever was wrong with me. I figured you looked like you needed some serious fixing. She watched him take a tentative sip of the broth, then saw his entire expression change. Not quite a smile, but something close to human satisfaction. "This is..." He paused, taking another spoonful like he was conducting a scientific experiment. "Actually really good. The coffee's strong enough to resurrect the dead, so pace yourself," she warned. But he was already drinking it with the desperation of a man who'd been surviving on office coffee for too long. "Where did you learn about Vietnamese food?" Damon asked, finishing the last drops of broth like it was liquid gold. He looked more human now, less like a robot running on stress and stubbornness. The shadows under his eyes were still there, but some of the tension had left his shoulders. "My neighbor Mrs. Nguyen taught me to cook when I was 16. My mom was working 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and Jake was too young to be trusted with anything more complicated than cereal. Lena collected the empty containers, surprised by how normal this conversation felt. She said good food was like medicine. It could heal almost anything if you made it with the right intentions. Damon was quiet for a moment, studying her face like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "And what were your intentions today?" "Keeping you from fainting during your 1:30 meeting and embarrassing us both." The next few weeks fell into a routine that was equal parts chaos and efficiency. Lena arrived at 7 with real breakfast and a schedule that actually included time for basic human needs. She learned Damon's quirks. He hated elevator music with a passion, always took the stairs when he was angry, and had a tendency to work through meals unless someone physically brought him food. He was demanding, impatient, and had zero tolerance for incompetence. But he wasn't cruel, which surprised her. When she made mistakes, like scheduling 2 meetings at the same time or forgetting to call his driver, he just fixed them and moved on with minimal drama. "You're learning," he said when she apologized for the 3rd time in one day. "Everyone screws up. The trick is not screwing up the same way twice." "Sir Grump-a-Lot, you have a conference call in 10 minutes, Lena announced, poking her head into his office where he was glaring at spreadsheets like they'd personally insulted his mother. Damon looked up with what might have been amusement dancing in his eyes. "Sir Grump-a-Lot?" His voice was dry as desert sand, but not angry. Lena shrugged, completely unrepentant. "If the grumpy shoe fits, wear it. Also, when's the last time you drank water that wasn't coffee?" She set a bottle of water on his desk next to his 5th espresso of the morning. "You're going to vibrate right out of your chair if you keep this up." Damon actually cracked a smirk, small but genuine. "Has anyone ever told you that you're completely insubordinate?" "Daily. Usually by you. It's part of my charm." Lena was getting frighteningly good at reading Damon's moods like a weather forecast. The way he rubbed his temples meant a headache was building. When he loosened his tie, he was frustrated with someone who wasn't in the room. And when he stood at the window staring at the city below, he was thinking about something that had absolutely nothing to do with quarterly reports or merger agreements. She started keeping aspirin in her desk drawer, learned to reschedule non-essential meetings when he looked like death warmed over, and discovered that Thai food was his weakness when the stress levels hit critical mass. "You're surprisingly efficient for someone who insults me regularly," he told her one evening as she organized his calendar for the next day. "Were you this good at the diner?" Lena looked up from her computer with a grin. The diner didn't require a PhD in Damon Wolf psychology. "You're way more complicated than hash browns and coffee refills," she replied, walking out. "Go home, Carter." Damon's voice drifted from his office at 8 p.m., but the light was still on, and she could hear him shuffling papers like he was settling in for the long haul. Lena saved her work and walked to his doorway, crossing her arms. "Not until you do. Rebecca told me horror stories about the last assistant who let you stay here until midnight every night. I'm not enabling your workaholic tendencies." She leaned against the doorframe. "When's the last time you went home before 10 p.m.? He looked up from his contracts, genuinely thinking about it. "I honestly don't remember. That's not healthy even for billionaires. You're going to burn out and die, and then who's going to sign my paychecks?" He sighed, tired of her already. He knew she wasn't leaving him. He packed his bag and walked behind her. "What do you do when you're not working?" Lena asked one afternoon while trying to block out actual free time in his schedule. It was like trying to find space in a jigsaw puzzle that was already complete. Damon looked at her like she'd asked him to explain theoretical physics in interpretive dance. "I work. That's what I do." Lena frowned at the computer screen. "That's not what I meant. Hobbies, friends, fun activities that don't involve spreadsheets or hostile takeovers. You know, normal human stuff." The silence stretched long enough to be uncomfortable. "I don't have time for normal human stuff," he said finally. "Maybe that's exactly the problem," Lena muttered, but loud enough for him to hear. His head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "Nothing, sir. Your 3 o'clock is here." Lena started noticing things that made her stomach twist with worry. The way Damon winced when he thought no one was looking. The prescription bottles he kept in his locked desk drawer. The fact that he never ate lunch unless she brought it to him, and even then he just picked at it like food was an inconvenience. "Are you okay?" she asked one afternoon when she caught him massaging his temples for the 4th time in an hour. His face was pale and there was sweat beading on his forehead despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Fine," he said automatically, the same way he always did. "That's what people say when they're definitely not fine," Lena observed, studying his face with growing concern. "Do you need me to call a doctor?" The look he gave her could have frozen hell. "I said I'm fine." The next morning, Damon looked like a zombie. He was moving carefully, like everything ached, and kept squinting at his computer screen like the brightness was personally attacking him. "Okay, that's it." Lena marched into his office and started shutting down his computer with the determination of someone on a mission. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was sharp, but weaker than usual. "Staging an intervention. You're sick, and you're going home right now. I have 3 meetings this afternoon, which I'm rescheduling. Rebecca can handle the important calls, and everything else can wait until you're not actively dying." She stood between him and his desk, arms crossed like a bouncer at an exclusive club. "Don't make me physically drag you out of this office, because I absolutely will." Damon was too exhausted to argue effectively, which proved Lena's point better than any medical examination could have. She called his driver, cleared his afternoon schedule, and somehow convinced him to let her ride along to make sure he actually went home instead of sneaking off to some other office location. His penthouse apartment was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive, minimalist, and about as welcoming as a museum exhibit. It was also obvious that no one actually lived there. The kitchen looked like a showroom, the living room was straight out of an interior design magazine, and there wasn't a single personal photograph anywhere. "When's the last time you cooked a meal in that kitchen?" she asked, opening cabinets to find them practically empty. "I don't cook," he admitted, collapsing onto the white leather couch like his strings had been cut. "That explains everything," Lena muttered, investigating his refrigerator. Energy drinks, expired takeout containers, and what might have been yogurt from the previous geological era. "No wonder you're falling apart. You're surviving on caffeine and sheer stubbornness." She made a quick run to the grocery store, using the emergency credit card he'd given her for situations exactly like this. When she got back, Damon was asleep on the couch, looking younger and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. She made soup, nothing fancy, just chicken broth and vegetables that wouldn't offend his apparently delicate constitution, and left it warming on the stove with a note. "Eat this. All of it. Don't make me come back here and force-feed you like a stubborn toddler." When Damon returned to work 2 days later, something fundamental had shifted between them. He looked better, rested, less like he was held together by coffee and pure willpower, and when Lena asked how he was feeling, he actually answered instead of deflecting like usual. "Better. Thank you," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Genuine gratitude, maybe, or surprise that someone had cared enough to take care of him when he couldn't take care of himself. The soup was really good. Lena tried not to look too pleased with herself. Mrs. Nguyen's recipe. She always said sick people needed real food, not whatever passes for nutrition in your life. She paused, then added more gently, "You scared me. You can't keep treating your body like it's a machine that doesn't need maintenance." Over the following weeks, Their working relationship evolved into something that felt more like partnership than employer and employee. Lena still managed his impossible schedule and made sure he ate actual food, but now she also made sure he took real breaks, drank water, and occasionally left the office before the cleaning crew arrived. In return, Damon started trusting her with bigger responsibilities. She handled client calls, managed sensitive appointments, and even sat in on meetings to take notes and ask the questions he was too proud to ask. "You're completely wasted as an assistant," he told her one evening as she organized contracts with the efficiency of someone who actually understood business. "You should be running your own company." Lena looked up from the files with a grin. "Maybe someday. Right now, I'm busy keeping you from self-destructing in spectacular fashion." "Tell me about your brother," Damon said one afternoon during a rare quiet moment when they weren't putting out corporate fires or managing crises. Lena was surprised by the question. He usually kept their conversations strictly professional, like personal details might contaminate the workspace. "Jake? He's brilliant. Way smarter than me, which is really saying something. He was studying business before he got sick, had all these plans to start his own tech company and change the world." She smiled, but it was edged with sadness. "Now he spends most of his time fighting his condition and trying to finish his degree online when he has the energy." Damon was quiet for a moment, actually listening instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. "What's wrong with him? Chronic illness. Complicated, expensive, and exhausting. But he never complains, never gives up. He's tougher than anyone I know." "I had a brother once," Damon said quietly, turning to stare out the window at the city spread below them. Lena looked up from her computer, genuinely surprised. He'd never mentioned family before, and she'd started to assume he'd emerged fully formed from some corporate laboratory. "Had?" she asked gently, recognizing the past tense for what it meant. "He died when I was 22. Car accident on a rainy night." His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear decades of pain underneath the calm surface. "I was supposed to be in that car with him, but I had a meeting I couldn't reschedule. Business was more important than spending time with my little brother." Lena stood up and walked over to him, stopping just close enough to see his reflection in the glass. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That's not your fault." He turned then, and they were suddenly face to face, closer than they'd ever been. For a moment, the air between them crackled with something dangerous and unspoken. His eyes dropped to her lips, and she felt her breath catch. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment like glass. That night, Damon sat in his penthouse, but for once he wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about the moment in his office when Lena had stood so close he could smell her shampoo, when he'd almost done something incredibly stupid like kiss his assistant. The way she'd looked at him with such understanding, such warmth. It was nothing like the calculated sympathy he usually got from people. When had she become so important to him? When had her opinions started mattering more than his board members? When had her smile become the thing he looked forward to most each day? The realization hit him hard. He was completely obsessed with Lena Carter. Not just attracted to her. Obsessed. He thought about her constantly, worried about her when she was late, felt actual physical relief when she walked into his office each morning. He'd rearranged his entire life around her presence, eaten foods he'd never tried before just because she'd brought them, started taking better care of himself because she'd asked him to. This was dangerous territory. She worked for him. She needed the job for her brother's medical bills. The power dynamic was all wrong, and yet he couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if his phone hadn't interrupted them. He was in serious trouble. After that conversation, the invisible wall between them started crumbling brick by brick. Damon asked about Jake more often, remembering details about his condition and treatment. When Lena mentioned worrying about her brother's medical bills, he quietly arranged for the company health insurance to include family coverage for certain employees. "This covers Jake too," he said casually, sliding the updated insurance paperwork across her desk like it was no big deal. "All employees get family coverage after 6 months." Lena stared at the documents, her throat tight with emotion. She'd been working there for exactly 6 months. "Thank you," she whispered, but the words felt completely inadequate. "It's just insurance," he said gruffly, but she caught him watching her face as she read through the comprehensive coverage details. Life was good, which should have been Lena's first warning that everything was about to go completely sideways. Damon was eating regular meals, taking actual breaks, and had even smiled at one of her jokes the previous week. She'd found her rhythm in the job and was handling responsibilities that would have terrified her 6 months ago. Then the email arrived. Technova Solutions, one of the biggest names in software development and Wolf Industries' main competitor, wanted to interview her for a senior developer position. The salary they mentioned made her current $100,000 look like pocket change, and it was exactly the kind of job she'd dreamed about before dropping out of college. "We've heard impressive things about your capabilities," the email read. "Your background in computer science combined with your business experience makes you an ideal candidate." Lena stared at the screen, her heart racing. This was everything she'd ever wanted professionally. But as she thought about responding, she couldn't help thinking about Damon, how he trusted her with sensitive information, how they'd grown closer over the months, how he'd quietly arranged for Jake's health coverage. Her finger hovered over the reply button when Dr. Victoria Hamilton appeared in her office doorway like a beautiful, brilliant storm cloud. She worked in the company's research and development division, had 2 PhDs and a smile that could probably stop traffic. More importantly, she'd been trying to get FaceTime with Damon for months, scheduling urgent meetings that never seemed quite as urgent as advertised. A crush everyone knew about but couldn't understand. "She's been asking questions about you," Rebecca mentioned casually one afternoon. "Wants to know if you're really just his assistant or if there's something else going on between you two." Lena felt something cold and unpleasant settle in her stomach. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. But I don't think she believed me." "You look conflicted," Victoria said, stepping into Lena's office uninvited. She was stunning in that effortless way that came from good genes and expensive everything, the kind of woman who made other women feel like they were playing dress-up in grown-up clothes. "Just work stuff," Lena replied, quickly closing the email. But Victoria had sharp eyes and was already glancing at her computer screen with curiosity. "Technova? Interesting choice. They're our biggest competitor, you know? I noticed how close you've become with Damon. I just wanted to warn you. He's mine. He will never love a lowlife like you, and if you don't leave, there's nothing you can do about it," Lena said, interrupting her. "We'll see," Victoria hissed, walking out and leaving the door open. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning like a bomb going off in slow motion. Lena was reviewing Damon's schedule when her phone started buzzing with notifications from news apps she'd never downloaded. The first article appeared on a gossip website that specialized in business scandals and celebrity takedowns. "Billionaire's dirty secret. Damon Wolf's hidden family scandal exposed." The photos were grainy but damaging. Lena leaving the Wolf building, Jake at a medical appointment, and somehow pictures of them together outside their apartment building. The story was a masterpiece of creative fiction. Jake was supposedly Damon's illegitimate son from a secret relationship with her. Lena was being paid to keep quiet about the whole thing, and her assistant job was an elaborate cover-up to hide the monthly hush money payments. Lena's phone exploded with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters, gossip bloggers, and random strangers who'd somehow gotten her contact information and wanted to know if the story was true. She turned off her phone and sat in her tiny apartment, watching the story spread across social media like a virus designed to destroy lives. The Technova email sat unanswered in her inbox, suddenly seeming like either perfect timing or the worst possible coincidence. The story had been picked up by 3 major news outlets and was trending on 2 different social media platforms. The comments section was a toxic wasteland of speculation and judgment. "It's all lies," she said, but her voice sounded hollow even to herself. Every single word. "But that doesn't matter, does it? People believe what they want to believe." Lena arrived at the office the next morning to find reporters camped outside the building like it was a crime scene. Security guards were checking IDs at every entrance, and the atmosphere inside felt like a funeral. Rebecca met her at the elevator with a grim expression that said everything. "He's been in emergency meetings with the legal team since 5 a.m., Rebecca said quietly. "The board is absolutely furious. There are rumors about removing him as CEO." Lena went straight to Damon's office, her heart pounding. She could hear voices through the door, and she stopped cold when she recognized the conversation. "Strongly advised to distance yourself from the situation entirely. Don't comment, don't deny, and absolutely do not defend her. This will blow over in a few weeks if you don't add fuel to the fire. Your business comes first." That was the head of legal. Then she heard Damon's voice, cold and businesslike. "Fine. Whatever protects the company. Do what you think is best." Her heart shattered into a million pieces. After everything they'd been through, after all the late nights and personal conversations, after the way he'd quietly taken care of Jake's medical coverage, when it came down to choosing between her and his business reputation, he chose business without hesitation. Lena didn't bother knocking. She walked into the conference room facing a table full of expensive suits who looked at her like she was something that had crawled out of a sewer. Damon was standing at the window with his back to the room, perfectly still and completely silent. "I quit," she said clearly, placing her employee ID card and company credit card on the polished table. "Effective immediately." One of the lawyers started to speak, but she cut him off with a look that could have melted steel. "I don't need severance pay, and I won't be making any statements to the press. I just wanted to say in person that everything in those articles is a complete lie." She looked at Damon's reflection in the window, willing him to turn around, to say something. Anything that would prove their months together had meant something to him. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge her presence. "Goodbye, Mr. Wolf." As she walked out, Lena thought about the Technova offer sitting in her email. At least now the decision was easy. She had no loyalty left to betray. She finally cried after years of hiding her pain in sarcasm. The tears came pouring when she saw a follow-up email from Technova about how they couldn't work with her anymore. Her chest was physically hurting. The person she had sacrificed this for couldn't even stand up for her. 3 weeks passed like 3 years. Lena found a small internship at a local nonprofit organization, using the skills she'd learned at Wolf Industries to manage their volunteer programs and donor database. The pay was terrible compared to what she'd been making, but it was honest work, and no one cared about gossip websites or business scandals. Jake was furious at first, then worried, then resigned to the whole situation. "You did the right thing," he told her one evening as they shared cheap takeout and watched the news coverage finally start to die down. "He should have defended you. He should have told those lawyers to go to hell and stood up for what was right." Lena nodded agreement, but part of her kept waiting for her phone to ring, for some sign that the man she'd started to care about was more than just another rich guy protecting his reputation at any cost. Lena was reorganizing the nonprofit's hopelessly tangled filing system when Rebecca appeared in the doorway like a ghost from her previous life. She was wearing a skirt and a sweater instead of her usual business attire, and she looked uncomfortable but determined. "We need to talk," Rebecca said without preamble. They went to a coffee shop around the corner, where Rebecca explained what had happened after Lena's dramatic exit. How Damon had fired the entire legal team the very next day. How he'd hired private investigators to trace the source of the leaked story back to its origin and clear it. How Dr. Victoria Hamilton was fired without pay. "He's been absolutely miserable," Rebecca said finally. "Like genuinely destroyed. Not just his usual grumpy self. Completely broken." Lena was leaving the nonprofit on a Friday evening when she saw him. Damon Wolfe, sitting on the steps of her apartment building like some kind of expensive, well-dressed homeless person. He was wearing a simple plain pair of pants and a rumpled shirt instead of his usual armor of designer suits. "What are you doing here?" she asked, stopping a few feet away like he might be dangerous. "I donated $10 million to medical research in Jake's name," he said without looking up. "I also bought the building that houses your nonprofit and made sure your funding is secure for the next 5 years. Lena stared at him in complete shock. "That doesn't answer my question." Finally, he looked up at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. Raw, honest fear. "I don't want someone efficient, Lena. I want someone who makes me feel human again. That's you." "That was the corniest thing I've ever heard," Lena said, but she was smiling despite herself. Damon stood up slowly, like he was afraid she might run away if he moved too fast. "Took you long enough, Wallet Boy," she added, using the nickname that had somehow become theirs during all those months of arguments and coffee runs and late nights at the office. He laughed, really laughed out loud, and the sound was so unexpected and wonderful that she found herself stepping closer. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I should have defended you from the beginning. I should have told them all to go to hell and stood by you no matter what." Lena reached up and touched his face gently, feeling the stubble under her fingers. "You're here now. That's what matters." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been but had always been looking for. And for the first time in weeks, the world felt exactly right. So tell me, were you right about who the villain was? Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you never miss these amazing, transformative, inspiring, and impressive stories to help you relax.